The U.S. President Joe Biden met the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu at the White House. This is the first meeting in Washington during Biden's presidency. They discussed the ceasefire deal with Hamas, which, although proposed weeks ago, has not been agreed upon, and the release of a dozen of hostages still being held by Hamas. It all comes a day after Netanyahu's controversial address to Congress, which saw thousands of protests on the streets outside the U.S. Capitol. Nick Harper reports from Washington.
Multiple meetings for the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu here in Washington, the first with President Joe Biden. The two men have known each other for about 40 years, something that Netanyahu reflected on during their Oval Office meeting, saying that Biden had also known every Israeli Prime Minister for the last 50 years. However, they discussed weightier issues in their private meeting, including that ceasefire deal. It was proposed a couple of months ago, but has still not come to fruition. And that includes the release of hostages still being held by Hamas in Gaza. Of course, we've seen something of a rift grow between the two leaders in the last 9 months since this conflict began. Biden has been pushing harder against Netanyahu for Israel to reduce its military offensive, to try and ensure that civilians are not caught up in the crossfire. But we have seen that death toll mount. Now, with Biden unfettered by the need to mount a re-election campaign and knowing that he only has another 6 months in office, there is some thinking that he will be pushing much harder now to try and stop the conflict, but also make sure that Israel reduces what it's doing there, its offensive, its military hardware, the large-scale bombs that it's using in largely populated, densely populated civilian areas. Also here in Washington, the Prime Minister met with Kamala Harris, the Vice President, but also the presumptive Democratic Party nominee. She has said in the past that she would continue that US commitment of support to Israel, including military assistance. But there is speculation that if she becomes president, she will push harder on the humanitarian side of things to ensure that Palestinian civilians are helped by Israel rather than being caught up in the conflict.
I will always ensure that Israel is able to defend itself, including from Iran and Iran-backed militias such as Hamas and Hezbollah. I have had an unwavering commitment to the existence of the State of Israel, to its security, and to the people of Israel. And I will not be silent. Thanks to the leadership of our President Joe Biden, there is a deal on the table for a ceasefire and a hostage deal.
On Friday, the Prime Minister heads to Florida to meet with Donald Trump, someone that he knows from Donald Trump's past presidency. Indeed, the last time that Netanyahu was here in the United States was during the Trump administration about 4 years ago. Those two men have something of a closer bond than we've seen between Biden and Netanyahu. Netanyahu, I guess, hedging his bets during the course of this trip, meeting with the two people, Harris and Trump, one of which will become the president after November's election. Nick Harper in Washington, reporting for DD India.
The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu met with relatives of hostages held by Hamas. Now, at that meeting, following his address to the U.S. Congress, Netanyahu said that the families of hostages praying, yearning to see their loved ones brought home. And during his trip to Washington, D.C., he was joined by the U.S. House of Representatives Speaker Mike Johnson. The White House has said that they are close. They are close to a Gaza ceasefire deal. In a meeting with the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, the U.S. President Joe Biden has expressed the need to close the remaining gaps and finalize the Gaza deal as soon as possible.
There are gaps that remain, and our team continues to work with our counterparts in the region to see if we can't close those gaps. We believe that they are of a nature where they can be closed and that we can achieve a deal. But it's going to require, as it always does, some leadership, some compromise, and an effort to get there. The President will be reaffirming for Prime Minister Netanyahu that he believes we need to get there and that we need to get there soon.
The U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris begins her campaign trail, and after replacing President Joe Biden as the Democratic presidential nominee, presumptive that is, her first video advertisement was released on Thursday, framing the campaign as a battle to protect Americans. their individual liberties. The U.S. Vice President rallied the American Federation of Teachers on Friday during its 88th National Convention in Houston. While addressing the officials there, Kamala Harris focused on economic policy and workers' rights, touting plans for affordable health care and child care.
Donald Trump and his extreme allies want to take our nation back to failed trickle-down economic policies, back to union busting, back to tax breaks for billionaires. Donald Trump and his allies want to cut Medicare and Social Security, to stop student loan forgiveness for teachers and other public servants. And I say to AFT, they even want to eliminate the Department of Education.
Kamala Harris also said that she was ready to debate the Republican presidential candidate, Donald Trump. Responding to questions by reporters at the joint base Andrews, Harris reiterated her commitment to the previously agreed debate on the 10th of September and said that it appeared that Trump was backpedaling out of that meeting.
So many of you have been asking me about the debate, and I'll tell you, I'm ready to debate Donald Trump. I have agreed to the previously agreed upon September 10th debate. He agreed to that previously. Now it appears he's backpedaling, but I'm ready. And I think the voters deserve to see the split screen that exists in this race on a debate stage. And so I'm ready. Let's go.